You're listening to the Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast from handsycomprehensiveexam.com. I'm your host, Lindsay Oden. Hey, welcome to episode 14 of the Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast. Today on the podcast, we have my friend Matt Hall from Harvard University, and we discuss the 2016 presidential election races in both the Democratic and Republican parties. So strap in and enjoy. Good morning, good rainy Las Vegas morning to you all. I am here with a good friend of mine, Matt Hall. Say hello.
Hey, how's it going?
We are here today. Now, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do and where are you currently?
Well, I'm a college student currently going to Harvard, and I am a senior and studying at the history department.
And what is next for you?
I have no idea.
No clue yet?
I'm thinking I want to move to Seattle and do some kind of internship or work before going to grad school.
And what do you want to study at grad school? History some more?
Maybe. Actually, I was thinking of going to business school.
And okay. Well, that's if you're going to be a capitalist slave the rest of your life, I guess that's completely reasonable.
Well, I want to go to Stanford Business School, so it's at least like the Google type of capitalist slave instead of the Goldman Sachs type.
Oh, I guess that is marginally better. And it's in California, which is pretty good, I guess.
Oh, yeah, California.
Well, I've asked you here to be on the podcast this week because your analysis of the election so far, the primary election, both the Republican and the Democratic Party, has been so solid that I just had to have you on to ask you a few questions. So the three topics we're going to get to today, we're going to talk about Ted Cruz selecting Cruz-Fiorina as his potential running mate should he get the Republican nomination for president. And the second one, we're going to talk about Trump claiming that Hillary has played the woman card. And then the last topic we're going to talk about is the endgame for the Sanders campaign, now that it looks like the Democratic primary is pretty much wrapped up. So you ready to go?
Yeah, totally ready. Let's do this.
All right. So here's my interesting theory on the Cruz-Fiorina pick. And it's because we have to assume that Ted Cruz is intelligent and an effective campaigner, right? Because most of the... I know, it's a big stretch.
Okay, yeah, all right. So let's assume that he's a rational actor.
Yeah. Most of the analysis I've seen so far has been Ted Cruz is making a terrible mistake. And we can say he's made a mistake, but we don't have to chalk it up to his stupidity or malice or anything like that. I think he's made a desperation play. What is your initial inclination towards the Fiorina pick?
I think you're right. I think that you're taking the right approach and assuming that he has a rational set of reasons for this. And I've talked a little bit about that before, and that, for example, he probably thinks that picking someone who is really hardcore about abortion and women's reproductive rights is an awesome idea. Like, maybe in his mind, he thinks, oh yeah, that's going to really appeal to like the conservative base, which is what he's based his whole campaign around. The fact that that actually alienates people and probably just confirms to them that he doesn't get along with others, especially like insiders or make politically pragmatic decisions, maybe he's just accepting that and he thinks that somehow he can like play around that, but it's not going to work.
Do you think he's possibly such a hardcore ideologue that he would never consider even picking a moderate to be on the ticket with him?
I mean, he probably would consider it, but what do you think? I don't think he would personally, but do you think that he would are there any examples of where he has like moderated his position or picked like a middle of the road candidate to help him out?
No, my first thought was that he's picked Fiorina because they agree on, like you were saying, about women's issues and that she herself is also a hardcore Christian conservative like he is. My feeling is that there is a major strain in the Republican Party that believes most of America is like that. Despite the polls and despite the demographics, they honestly and earnestly believe that the silent majority is still the most potent part of American politics. So I think this is a circling the wagons technique if that's what he generally believes. And so he would never pick a moderate because he doesn't believe that most Americans are moderate.
I think that's right. He does. I mean, he was raised in an environment where his his father was one of those like extreme Christians who thinks that the U.S. needs to be turned into a theocracy, and then they raised him to think. Like when you go back and look at some of the interviews, they say things like, "Oh, you're like the new prophet, or you're like coming to rescue America." They see him as like kind of a savior figure. So you're raised your whole life with this idea that the U.S. needs to be a theocracy, and that you are the chosen one, at least in your parents' and your pastor's eyes. And then you live in Texas, where you're probably in one of the safest electoral districts ever. And you get some pretty big bands of crazy. We came from Idaho, so we have our own Tea Partier Raw Labrador, who seems pretty much the same way.
Well, I think you've touched on a really interesting point here, is this kind of messiah complex. He's probably been told his entire life that this is what he's made for. I think a lot of politicians actually, I mean, they were probably told their entire lives how brilliant and intelligent they are, and you know, how much good they can do for the country. And I think it's probably just a worldview that's baked into a lot of people who desire power, is that they think they can do some good for the world. And I think his particular vision of the world is this hardcore Christian conservative view. And it would then make sense that he would pick somebody like Fiorina because she jives with that worldview, even though she's a woman.
Right. And he probably is one of those people who doesn't like think of himself as a sexist pig or anything like that.
I don't think anybody thinks of themselves as a sexist pig. They probably feel like really justified. But we'll get to that in the second segment for sure.
Of course, yeah. Gotta love Trump. He's already haunting our conversation.
Right.
So let me see if there's any other reasons. I mean, Cruz could also be just trying to put himself back in the news, and it succeeded for like a day or two.
Yeah, that is true. Here's an interesting theory that I read from Jim Newell in Slate. He said it's Trump bait to get Trump to say something incredibly stupid. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean,
did Trump even need bait? I don't know.
I mean, exactly. Like, he doesn't need to like be tricked into saying something stupid or sexist or rude. He'll do it eventually. Interestingly, he hasn't with Carly Fiorina yet.
Well, he did earlier in the primaries, right? He criticized her appearance, and she really got under his skin. You could see during a couple of the debates when she got promoted to the varsity stage, she seemed to really bother him. But at the same time, like, what are the other stupid things that the Cruz campaign could possibly hope for Trump to say that he hasn't already said?
Yeah, he's kind of exhausted the well. I mean, then again, he does keep coming up with like new surprising ways to subvert his own campaign, which is impressive. But I don't like. We'll see if it works. So far, he hasn't said anything new. And plus, I think what's funny is what took Cruz right out of the news after this is John Boehner saying that he is Lucifer in the flesh. And then Representative King said that gives Lucifer a bad name.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, that's so perfect.
And this has been just a perpetual source of schadenfreude for me, is watching the Republican Party eat itself alive. Just they're trying to amass around, you know, somebody who's not Donald Trump. Their best option is Ted Cruz, and you can just see they hate it. They hate it so much. It eats them. It eats them alive inside. They're like, we have to pick between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. See, that's how socialists feel when we have to pick between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Like, they're actually rather close together. But you don't see the Democratic Party consuming itself. You see, most Democrats would be happy with either one to be the party's nominee. But on the Republican side, even the establishment who's saying we can never have Trump is like, oh, Cruz, oh, you know, like they're just about to throw up all over themselves.
Exactly. And I think that's why the Never Trump movement has been failing, or that it's actually been increasing Trump's standing in the polls, and he's been beating his expectations, and like that's why he swept the last 5 states.
Well, that's a really good observation too, is that he's gone rhetorically to this argument that the system is rigged, and you can see it, and that's the exact kind of populist argument that has worked for him. Let's transition to the second part about Fiorina here, is that she comes from Northern California, so possibly Cruz's hope would be to split off some of those delegates that are coming up in future contests here, and so he's hoping I mean, there's no indication that this is true in the polls, but he's hoping to peel off a couple delegates in Northern California because that's where Carly Fiorina is from. What do you think about that perspective?
It might work. I mean, it completely depends on how popular she is in the state. It's actually, you know what? I hadn't actually considered that angle, so I kind of like that. But again, it depends on whether she's actually like a popular figure. Like, for example, putting
we know
Marco
that she's
Rubio
not
on your ticket a few weeks ago wouldn't have gone very well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that she's not a popular figure in
Well,
California.
she ran for office in California. I believe she ran for Senate, and she was defeated. She self-funded her campaign to a large extent, and then she got pretty soundly defeated by the Democrats. So we know that, at least in terms of raw percentages in a general election sense, she's unpopular in California. But of course, we're still talking about the primaries. I'm just not convinced that she's the kind of person that would convince somebody to go for Cruz. I mean, like, who does he convert with this pick?
Exactly. And what's funny is that when I talk to some of my conservative friends back home, is that they always seemed to think of Fiorina as a B-list Hillary Clinton. They always saw her as like kind of like this shrewd, like shrill, awful woman. Like there's an element of sexism there. And so for that reason, I don't think that it's a great pick. I mean, maybe, I don't know, can anybody really believe that Cruz really likes women and that he is like, he's like, I'm totally there for women's rights. And I mean, he voted down the recent Equal Pay Act, whose name escapes me. And he thinks that the idea of paid maternity leave is a joke. Like,
right.
This is not a guy he's not gonna be winning anyone that way. Really, the thing that I've heard is that the main contest is Indiana. So if Trump wins that, he's basically got it locked up.
Right.
I think that's because California is proportional, so it won't be as big of a deal whether he wins it or not. Let me double check that.
While you're doing that, let's talk about the gender angle just a little bit, because I think it's hard to ignore. We talked about Trump bait, but I guess the question is for the Cruz campaign, what woman who is supporting Trump is now going to support Cruz? And as a corollary to that, what woman who is supporting Hillary Clinton is now going to back Ted Cruz? Do those people even exist?
I don't think they exist for Clinton.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely true. There's no Democrats who are going to switch sides and vote for Cruz because of this move specifically.
Right. I don't think there's any move that he could make to pull over like the broad majority of Democrats.
Or independents, for that matter. Like, what independent who wasn't already going to vote for or against Clinton is going to have their mind changed by this move? I can't think of a single reason.
Mm-hmm.
If he had picked somebody more moderate and played the gender angle at the same time, a moderate female politician to be his running mate, then maybe you could say he was trying to broaden his base of support, but it's clear that he didn't. He didn't do that. He didn't broaden his base of support in the Republican Party or in the general election sense. And that's why ultimately I think this is the biggest mistake, is because he doesn't do himself any favors.
Right. Well, I think that this is a mistake, and then also broadly announcing that he was going to directly work with Kasich was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because that plays directly into Trump's narrative of the system is rigged. So
Exactly.
he picked a running mate that's not going to help him win delegates from anyone. Maybe a couple will peel off from Trump, but like, wow, I thought we already established that Fiorina was not popular even among Republicans.
Yeah, that's another thing that really surprised me, is he picked somebody from the primary who had been pretty soundly defeated in a lot of earlier contests. Like, she was only in for, I believe, 2 primaries, and then she suspended her campaign. So it's not like he picked some wildly popular Republican figure, you know? And I'm not even sure, given that the factions in the Republican Party would dictate that there is a broad base of support for any one particular Republican. Even somebody as important as Paul Ryan doesn't even have a huge base of support, given just how poorly he did in 2012 with Mitt Romney, and then his role as Speaker of the House when he was really waffling about taking the position in the first place. So it appears like, you know, who is a Republican who would have brought unity to the party? I can't even think of one, but Fiorina is certainly not that person.
Exactly, yeah. Which does lead to the interesting question. Again, it gets back to why the Never Trump movement doesn't work, because you can say, okay, Trump is awful, Trump is this terrible candidate, but you're going to replace him with Cruz? No. Like, I
Right.
think most people aren't willing to swallow that bitter pill because he's even, like, Cruz to me is even worse. And I'm glad that he's losing.
I do think that is something we have agreed on in the past, is that Cruz is worse on policy because at least some of the things that Donald Trump has said about universal health care and other things make sense in a kind of broad sense for the general election, and that Ted Cruz would never even consider waffling on those issues. So I think, like, if we're gonna 99% hate Donald Trump, we can 100% hate Ted Cruz.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm down with that.
Hey, this is Lindsay here at Intermission. You can follow me on Twitter at HCELindsay. That's HCELindsay. You can go to Patreon and support the show at patreon.com/LindsayOden. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, please remember to keep up with the blog and the website at handsy-comprehensive-exam.com. Let's get back to the show. Let's go ahead and move on to our second topic then, if you're good for the Cruz-Fiorina discussion.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So the other thing that happened this week that was a big deal was Donald Trump accused Hillary Clinton of playing the woman card, and he said that if she wasn't a woman, she would not have more than 5% of support. Boy, oh boy, is Donnie doing his absolute tip-toppity best to make sure that no woman will ever vote for him. What was your initial impression when you first heard this?
Well, part of it is that we had already gotten a version of it, but it wasn't direct. So Bernie Sanders had said that Hillary Clinton wasn't qualified because she had taken money from Wall Street people. And so he had not played the woman card at all. But the Hillary campaign very cleverly turned it into that. And they said that, they're attacking my record, and then women are held to a much higher standard for experience than men are. And so we already had this like kind of played out. And so that meant that Donald Trump threw a ball to Hillary Clinton that had already been teed up and she had already practiced for when it would actually happen. And then she just ran with it. It was a dumb thing of him to say, but that's not really saying much.
Well, of course. I mean, to recap a little bit, she responded by saying, well, if playing the woman card means being an advocate for equal pay and reproductive rights and women's issues, then deal me in, is what she said.
Yeah. And then she proceeded to actually make and print a real woman card with like a little like picture, like the little like bathroom picture on it, and then like sold it to her supporters for like $5. That was clever. I liked that move.
Yes. It was almost like they had planned for it, really.
Yeah, it's almost like a little too strategic. She made it seem like it was extemporaneous, and I like to tell myself that it was, but knowing how well she's reacted to like every Bernie attack, they must have planned this for months.
Of course. And I think they were just ready to play the woman card. But first of all, I think it's pretty ridiculous. I think there are many really fair criticisms of Hillary Clinton, and God knows I've made a lot of them. But the idea that I think it's pretty obvious that she's the best candidate in the race on women's issues, despite her checkered history with women's rights and women's issues in the past. But she is so far and away clearly the best on women's issues. It's just like Trump can't help himself. He has these huge negative disapproval ratings with women, and he's just like, that's because women are stupid and they only vote for other women. Like, he just can't help himself.
I mean, yes. However, I mean, I have heard people say that they just don't think that a woman should be president.
Yeah, but what are those people independents, or are those people members of the Democratic Party?
But he is still trying to seal up the Republican race. Like, he is still in that mode. So I'm thinking, okay, from a general election standpoint, none of what he's said so far makes any sense.
Right.
Like, just some of the most horrific rhetoric to come out of the Republican Party ever.
Yeah, since at least Barry Goldwater. I mean, when you run an open segregationist as your, during your primary campaign, you're going to hear a lot of ugly crap. And then here's Trump, and he sounds a lot like a segregationist.
Yes. With wanting to, like, separate out, well, to just stop Muslims from entering the country and monitor them. And
immigrants and anybody else who seems different. Oh, and by the way, anybody who criticizes him in the press, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, got to broaden those libel laws. So
Yeah, because if there's one thing that is too liberal in this country, it's the libel laws.
Exactly. Yeah. See, you're getting on the Trump train. You understand.
Choo choo. So I guess this when he says that Hillary Clinton has played the woman card, he coupled that with this criticism of the Democratic National Committee by saying that the DNC has mistreated Sanders and he wants Sanders to run as a third-party candidate, which is so transparent as to sound like a joke. You can see he's transitioning, I think, but he talked about his open pivot to the general election, and you can see it working into some of these speeches that he's been making. And it's so apparent to everybody listening that he has no clue what he's doing to himself. Like, he just cannot help doing and saying stupid things.
Yes. But at least there he's like attempting to tap in to what some Democrats surely want.
Right.
Like I've heard, especially like about a month ago when the doom was starting to set in, a lot of people were thinking, Sanders should run as this third-party candidate. He totally has a chance. No,
there's no indication. He can't even win in the Democratic primary. Like, what? I don't know where people saw this path to victory for a third-party candidate, because there isn't one. Not in our country, not how the electoral laws are currently set up. Like, there's just no path to victory for that to win the electoral votes. That's just not going to happen. So any third-party candidate who mounts a serious and substantial challenge to either party cripples the party that they are closest to. Sanders would cripple the Democratic Party. If Trump was denied the nomination for the Republicans and he ran as a third party, he would cripple the Republican candidate. It's pretty obvious at this point that suggesting that you want somebody to run third party is like suggesting you want somebody to self-sabotage the entire electoral process of their natural political allies.
Yes, which raises the question, do you think that the Republican Party might run a third-party candidate against Trump, since a lot of the establishment hates him?
They will try, because I've heard that it's incredibly difficult to get a third-party person on all 50 states' ballots at this point so late in the game. And so that is a reason why they probably won't, because they will need every single electoral victory they can get, and if they can't get on the ballot in several states because it's too late in the game, then they won't even try. However, I do believe that there will be a strong outpouring for people in the Constitution Party and the Libertarian Party, whoever they end up running, will see bumps in their support this electoral cycle. They'll see small percentage points jumps because Trump is going to push them away from the Republicans, but I don't think they're going to run a serious third-party candidate. They're not going to trot out Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney or something for a Libertarian Party run.
Yeah, Mitt Romney would be a perfect fit for a Libertarian Party run.
Well, if you just think, I mean, at this point, they've completely given up on this establishment part of the party. They have to look either at Cruz or at Trump, it's a beautiful, beautiful sight to behold. But if you wanted to run a third party person, you would have to run somebody who's much closer to the center and somebody who's much more moderate, who can steal votes from both the Democrat nominee and the Republican nominee if it's Trump. So you'd want somebody who's close to the middle, and I think the only person you could even consider at that point would be Mitt Romney. Right. Or John McCain, but I mean, that's over.
Yeah, he played that out. And he's kind of, lately he's been a lot more partisan too, from what I've noticed whenever he comes up in the news. He doesn't seem like he's the same person that he used to be.
Are we talking about Mitt Romney?
Wow, you could say that about John McCain or Mitt Romney.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, I was talking about John McCain specifically, but yeah, it feels like the Republican Party has kind of backed themselves into a corner because they've rewarded extremism and kind of far-right tactics for so long.
Right.
That these are the candidates that they've been setting themselves up to get.
Well, and it's a little bit coming back to bite them because of the way that they have established legislative districts that are so easy to win through gerrymandering. We know after the 2000 and the 2010 censuses that the Republican Party made a concerted effort to make a lot of districts a lot easier to win. And the result from that has been you don't have to trot out a middle-of-the-road Republican anymore to win those districts. You can trot out the craziest person you can find, and they still win. Just look at Michelle Bachmann, right? That she has absolutely no political skills at all. You can see it in the way that she speaks, but still she wins pretty overwhelmingly in that district that she ran in. And you're exactly right that this is the kind of the birds coming home to roost for the Republican Party, because they've made it too easy for their fringe elements to get not only on the ballot to win primary contests and then to win in general election contests.
And I really don't think that they planned for that at all. They just saw like, oh, we can probably easily win our primaries, and then we're going to make the general elections way easier for us by gerrymandering these districts. They didn't expect this Tea Party movement to come and basically say, nope, we're going to put in even more extreme versions of you and ruin your careers.
I think when they saw the Tea Party movement forming, they saw an opportunity to harness a lot of grassroots populist anger towards the liberal establishment and Washington generally. That there were a lot of people, they thought they could push the party to the right and that would be a success. But we know it has actually come back to bite them, because the Tea Party was a lot harder to control than they thought it was going to be. And you can see that with the government shutdown run by Cruz and the elements in Congress who have no idea what they're doing because they have no legislative experience. And then you have people like John Boehner who are trying to wrangle them all together, and he can't.
Mm-hmm. And what's funny is that reminds me of the new Game of Thrones season. It just reminds me of...
Oh, don't spoil it. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, have you seen the last season then?
Yeah, I saw the last season.
Okay, it reminds me of what Cersei did with the Faith of the Seven, where she she sees this militant group that hates her enemies, and she's like, oh, great, I can use that. And so she arms them, and the first thing they do is they turn on you, because of course they are. They're extremists.
They're extremists. They see, I think, and I think this is the same for extreme racists that I've written about as well, is that they hate people who are close to them more than they hate their actual enemies, because they see the people who are close to them as being traitors to the cause. That moderate Republicans are traitors to the extremist Republican cause, in the same way that white people who have racially mixed marriages are traitors to the white race. So they hate those white people even more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that logic makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me of a Problematic Thoughts episode you did when you were talking about religion, and kind of hatred directed towards Muslims in general, when it's extreme element that is doing most of it. And you pointed out that the people getting most killed by extreme groups like ISIS are Muslims. They're attacking and killing kind of quote unquote their own people, or people that should be a lot closer to them ideologically. And I would bet it has a lot to do with the same reason, that the people close to you that just disagree with you a little look a lot more like traitors.
They've betrayed you in some way, and that is more wounding and it is more dangerous than your outright enemies, because at least you always know where your outright enemies stand. But people who are close to you, who may participate in your movement or who may tepidly accept your movement in some way, they are the ones who are most at risk of leaving your movement, and the ground is a lot less firm. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about, for example, Syrian refugees, we know that these people aren't terrorists by and large. 99.9% of them are not terrorists. They're fleeing terrorists. And to insinuate that these are the dangerous people is an absolute rhetorical flourish in order to get at the basest racist elements of our country. That's all it is. It's absolutely transparent in its rhetoric, and it's disgusting, but it's so easy, and that's why I think they like it.
Yeah, well, the easy move is kind of what the Republicans have screwed themselves over with.
Well, when you shoot for the bottom most common denominator, or what you believe the bottom most common denominator to be, and all of a sudden you end up with a lot of low information voters who end up voting for you because you speak to their basest instincts, which are often antisocial, or as I would call them, antisocial. I call racism and homophobia and all that. Those are antisocial attitudes. And so when you appeal to the antisocial, when you say that society is broken, we are being hurt by the liberal elements in our society, and we are being constrained and enslaved by the liberal media and liberal ethics and the gay agenda and all this, you can identify that the system is the problem. So naturally, all of your supporters become anti-system, antisocial people.
Right, and so it kind of throws moderation and negotiation and things like agreeing with the enemy under the bus, because
Right.
all of that becomes like an aspect of traitorism, or you're just contributing to the problem, and then you end up with candidates like Ted Cruz. Or, I mean, the problem is that Republicans also didn't consider that they're part of the establishment, like when they've
Yeah.
been attacking it. So that set up someone like Donald Trump, who is not who doesn't agree with the establishment. So I guess Trump and Ted Cruz are both elements of the same thing. And weirdly, Trump is clearly much more popular among Republicans than Cruz is.
Well, and you can just see too that this is the kind of product that you get after 4 decades of anti-establishment politics. You can start with, if we just want to limit this conversation, we can start with Reagan, who says that the problem with government is the government itself. So we can start with that. You move all the way up to the present day, where they've always targeted the government as the bad guy, right? They want to defund the EPA. They want to cripple all these social programs that are clearly helpful to millions of Americans. And why? Because the government is the problem. Then you get a guy like Trump who says, yeah, the government is the problem. I'm here to solve it because I'm not part of the government. And it's the natural response of people who have been taught for the last 3.5 decades that the government is the problem. And suddenly here's a guy who says, yeah, it is. Check it out. I'm not the government.
Yeah. And really, I can't strongly blame them for the decision in the Republican Party.
No, I can't either. It makes complete sense. Like, Trump is the most logical product of what has been occurring. This is his historical moment. This couldn't have happened 8 years ago.
Yeah, and he is taking advantage of it as much as he can. He doesn't even have to be that good. That's
no, it's not
the problem.
good.
Like, you would normally expect a candidate to have to like pick the perfect language and have like perfectly written speeches and have a great ground game. None of that for Trump.
None of it.
Yeah.
Let us then move from this topic to the third topic, which is the end game for the Sanders campaign. So after New York, I saw a lot of posts from the mainstream liberal media like Slate, how they were saying that, okay, it's time for Sanders to get out of the primary. And so as we go in here, it seems inevitable that Hillary Clinton is going to be the nominee. What should the Sanders campaign be doing at this point in time?
Wow. I don't think they can pull out any Hail Mary passes because I just can't. They would need like 61% of the vote and all the remaining states to win, so I don't think that's going to happen. I guess the goal would be what he had from the start, is just try to keep pushing Hillary to the left for as long as possible, or at least get some concessions from her, like trying to make an agreement with her camp and say like, okay, make a speech supporting this, this, and this. Like, definitely, I would personally really like it if he put all his money on Citizens United and says, I want you to make a promise that you will do everything you can to overturn this.
Right.
Which would be within his wheelhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to ask for. So he said, quote, if we don't win, we intend to win every delegate we can, so that when we go to Philadelphia, we will have the votes to put together the strongest progressive agenda that any party has ever seen, unquote. So that's what he said in a speech this week. And what I think the plan going forward, and his advisors have said as much, is to take the support that they've won in this election. He's made it a lot closer than it was supposed to be. He's obviously tapping into some kind of discontent in the heart of a lot of left-leaning people. And he believes that he can use that support, and he can use just the raw number of delegates he won to go to the convention and to get on things like the Rules Committee and the Platform Committee and help bring the Democratic Party into the 21st century. That's his next step. So I'm thinking that he has to keep going until June, just like Hillary Clinton did in 2008, by the way, just to keep going and to be able to keep speaking and to ensure his place on the stage at the DNC is a major one. He can make a major speech where he throws his support behind Hillary Clinton, but he at least gets to say, these are the things that are important to many Americans, and the proof is how many delegates I won.
Yes, and I think that's great. I want him to succeed in that regard. I mean, he's not going to win, so he's kind of like neutralized at this point. So any delegates he get, just allow him to kind of promote his more progressive agenda, which I think is in general good for the nation, especially in the hands of someone who's really talented with policy and kind of the nitty gritty like Hillary is.
Well, and you can see, too, in the demands that he's made, he said that Hillary Clinton must push for a $15 minimum wage. That's one of the things that he said. And that's not a, I will pass a $15 minimum wage policy argument about his campaign. He's now transitioned his campaign to saying Hillary Clinton should do this if she is the nominee.
Yes, which I mean, I don't personally agree with. I don't think that that's necessarily the best policy to implement mandatory $15 minimum wage. But at least he's pushing for it, I guess. Like, I guess those are the parts where I like him a little bit less. Like, of course, I'm going to like when he pushes Hillary to take the policies that I want her to. Like, Citizens United, please.
Right.
And then when he pushes her to do stuff like $15 minimum wage, you absolutely must support that. I'm like, let's start with 12.
Well, she needs to push for it as a place to be able to negotiate, because you can back down from a $15 minimum wage, but you can't back down from a 12. Like, 12 is not a living wage. 15 is like the minimum that it should be. But in order to get 12, you need to start at 15 and then be able to compromise.
The Trump strategy.
Well, I mean, this is just the way that our politics in this country work.
Yeah.
And say what you will about that, but the idea that the Democrats always want to start at the middle is the reason why their policies keep getting eroded, because they start from a place where they have a weak negotiating position and then are forced to negotiate even more, rather than taking a really strong position and then negotiating from there. So I think when we talk about the Sanders endgame, he should be asking the Democratic Party to put into its platform that it will push for measures that are on the fringe of Democratic Party policy, including universal single-payer health care and the $15 minimum wage, so that they at least have something to back down from when they go to negotiate. Especially, you can see in these debt ceiling negotiations where the programs are getting gutted all over the country because the Democrats start from a position of negotiation.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, like, not only from a negotiating standpoint, but also just for a winning an election standpoint. One of the things that's hurt Hillary Clinton a lot is that people don't like the idea of a mediocre vision. Like, let's be honest, she's calling for very tiny incremental changes, and you're running for president. You gotta shoot big. You gotta have like giant space programs and like going to destroy the Soviet Union. And we know how history works. Like, you gotta pull out the big guns, and so far she hasn't. So if Sanders can improve, like push her to go for more extreme, large, big policies, I think that will help her. In the general election, or at least it would normally, were she not running against crazy.
But let me ask you then, does Hillary Clinton even have those big guns? Because I've been arguing pretty consistently that she is so establishment that she doesn't really have this big grand vision, this big liberal project that she's going to carry out during her presidency. She's so middle of the road. She's practically a Republican, and I think a lot of really fair criticism says that she is practically a Republican. She's a center-right candidate, as far as I'm concerned. So tell me then, do you even think she has big guns that she could pull out at this point?
Well, that is the question. Well, she could. I mean, she could go in harder on some of the things that she's already supported, like the 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. Because so far what she's been like is she said, like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to pass it. No, like, just go all in and say, yes, I absolutely want this to be a thing. So first she could take some of her more liberal policies and double down on them. Then as far as what she could do in the general election, I mean, she could try to go for like a major tax reform, for example. And try to make that system better, because right now it's just filled with like loopholes and exemptions, and it benefits the rich, whereas she wants to mostly leave it the same. I think just because that's politically pragmatic. But she could try and come up with some kind of more progressive policy, especially because Republicans and Sanders have all been trying to do that. So why not throw her hat in?
You know what she could do? She could adopt the Sanders policy on the financial transactions tax. And I think this has two benefits for her. First of all, it solves what you just said, which is to double down on something that is more liberal and could be passed by the Democratic Party. But the other thing is, it makes her look stronger on Wall Street. That her biggest weakness right now is that she looks like a Wall Street shill. She won't release the transcripts of the speeches. She's taken all that money. Her campaign has been largely funded by super PACs and not small donations like the Sanders campaign was. So if she goes for the financial transactions tax, she gets to look like she's addressing something that Sanders brought up in the campaign. She gets to look a little bit stronger on Wall Street, and she gets to raise taxes on the rich, which is what most Americans want.
Yes. No, that sounds like a great idea, especially because then when someone brings up this idea of like you're a Wall Street shill, she can be like, she can point to that specifically and say, look, no, I'm not. See,
I want to raise their taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard people support Trump actually for the same reason, because they hear him in debates saying stuff like, oh, I'm going to have some kind of weird capital gains or capital transactions tax, and that somehow makes him like anti-Wall Street.
Right.
And so people will buy into that. Like, if people buy into that very basic level of not even trying, like his policy would benefit rich people by and large.
Yeah, we know that, and it would add several trillion to the deficit. I saw a report the other day that said, oh, guess what? All of Donald Trump's tax policies benefit rich people. And I was like, are we even surprised? Is that an article that needs to be written?
Yeah. And so all Hillary needs is something like this, where she can say symbolically, like, look, I'm not a Wall Street shell.
Yeah, this is going to be the symbolic election, because it's two very unpopular candidates. This is going to be, if it is between Trump and Hillary, it's two very unpopular people, and people are going to vote for Hillary because she's the lesser of two evils. I think she can actually galvanize her support by, oh my God, promising to do something important rather than being an establishment shill like she is.
Yeah. I think even the establishment, I think what they get into, especially on the Democratic side, I don't think this is the conversation on the Republican side, but this conversation on the Democrat side is we would like to do more, but we can't for pragmatic reasons. Like what you were discussing before, and that's why they always come up with mediocre, middle-of-the-road policies that don't really do a great job, like Obamacare.
Well, I was going to say, look at Obamacare. They took the idea that Mitt Romney passed when he was governor of Massachusetts. It was a Republican think tank idea to do the individual mandate, and the Democrats were like, hey, look, the Republicans already supported this. We can grab it. And it's like, no, that's what you settle for when you negotiate for something tougher. Then you incorporate some of their ideas. You don't start with their ideas.
And even then, they struggled to even pass that.
Yeah.
And among their own people, because they have this idea of like, oh, well, we don't want to like alienate our supporters back home, and they lost the election anyway. Yeah. Like, it didn't help them at all.
Well, I mean, and this is part of the reason that I got so alienated from the Democratic Party, because I voted for Obama in 2008, and I helped elect Walt Minnick, who was a Democrat from Idaho, and he went to Congress and he voted against the ACA, and I was like, what the shit, Walt? Whose side are you on? And then you look back, he was a Republican for years, and then he joined the Democrats so he could run against the extremist Bill Sally. Like, that's the only reason he ran as a Democrat, and I was like, oh, you tricked me.
Yeah. And now we have like even worse people.
Exactly.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Let's touch on one last thing as far as the Sanders campaign endgame goes, and I would briefly see, because I know you've probably read a lot about this, and I have seen it as well, is that there's an absolutely condescending tone towards Sanders and Sanders supporters saying, it's over, get out of the race, give it up, surrender to Hillary, and all the Bernie bros, shut the hell up. Have you noticed this condescension towards the Bernie supporters?
Yes, and I admit that I've probably at some points been a part of it.
Well, I have too, but probably for different reasons, but go on.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that one of the reasons you might be more skeptical is because he's not like the godlike savior that some of his supporters pretend him to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, see, obviously, and then on my side, one is that the math was just never there before him.
Right.
Second was that some of the like dismissive comments about the South and the Southern votes were kind of edging into maybe dangerous territory, if you
Dangerous,
understand
but
what.
never race baiting. Like, let's not accuse the Sanders campaign of race baiting.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, they came really close though.
I think
They
there's a
were
good reason
going.
why. You can understand why they did it, because the southern states in the general election are never going to vote for Hillary Clinton. We know that already. And I think he's making a potent argument saying that you can't look at just the primaries in the southern states as indicative of who should win the race. Because remember, that was really early in the race when she took a huge delegate lead, and he was saying, hold up, we got to get into Michigan and Colorado and Washington State, other places that are important on the electoral map that are possibly going to go for the Democrats in November. So, like, the southern states aren't as important as the pundits were making them out to be. But you are right when you say that the math was never there. Like, we know that already. The
Right.
math was against him from the very beginning. Like, he was polling in the very low 20s when the campaign started. It's a testament to how strong he's been as a campaigner that he gained so much ground and made this a real contest.
Yeah.
And that's why I resent the condescension towards Bernie supporters. Now, I am not a Bernie supporter in the most, strict sense of those words, but what I have noticed is that people criticizing him, telling him to get out of the race, is absolutely ridiculous. Not only considering that Hillary went to the convention in 2008, she campaigned all the way through June. Then she had a bunch of people behind her called the Pumas, the Party Unity My Ass people, and who absolutely refused to vote for Barack Obama in the general election. So it's like there's the level of hypocrisy that I just so thoroughly detest, and it's been propagated by the mainstream liberal media, and it's making me pretty sick.
Yeah, but back then and now there is fear, I think, especially among liberals, and I felt this way a couple weeks back of when Bernie was making this pivot to attack Hillary more directly and maybe a little more harshly. Didn't work for him. But I mean,
Right.
when he was first making the pivot and we thought it might work, a lot of liberals were terrified that he was going to start tearing the party apart, especially with how angry supporters, his Sanders supporters, have been with Hillary. And I think a lot of people are even more terrified because of who the Republican candidates are. Like, if it was someone like Mitt Romney, then I think actually Democrats would be more willing to accept someone like Sanders because they'd want like a real choice. But with Trump and Cruz, they want someone that's going to come out and be really strong and be able to take anything and absolutely win, because even the idea of a Cruz or Trump presidency is just terrifying. And so the condescension is an extension of fear. It's an extension of, oh my God, please shut up, because we need the party together for this. We cannot risk a Trump presidency whatsoever.
Well, I think you're right. And I think that's the point a lot of these commentators have made. It's like, can you imagine how bad Trump would be? We need to unite behind Hillary. And it's like, wait. Hold up. Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Just because Trump is awful does not mean that Hillary Clinton is not also awful. Like, those things are not mutually exclusive. And I've been arguing that for weeks. I'm like, they're both unacceptable. Why do we have to accept one or the other? Like, we don't have to get into it. You can go back into the archive and read what I wrote most recently about Hillary Clinton. But it's just, I get so tired of this false choice. It's not a choice. And I don't know. I honestly don't know who I'm going to vote for in the general election. If Nevada is close, I probably have to consider voting for Hillary just to stop Trump.
Yeah, so that's interesting, though, because in your last podcast, like last year, I think, you said that you would absolutely vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election.
Well, I've definitely evolved my position on that.
Well,
I was thinking pragmatically
to how dangerous Bernie Sanders has been. Because his existence has, at least for one voter, destroyed the party unity that you were so eagerly supporting before. And even back then, you were saying, no, I'm a socialist, so I don't completely support what these two candidates are all about, but I would still vote for them in the end. But now you're like,
I'm waffling.
I don't think so.
I mean,
I think a few more weeks of once we get into Trump versus Clinton, then your heart will be won back over, because you'll realize,
no, actually, I think it's going to go like this. It's going to be Trump versus Clinton. She's going to come out with huge polling leads. It's not even going to be close. And in Nevada, I can cast my ballot for whoever I want to, because that's what I used to do in Idaho. In 2012, I didn't vote for Barack Obama. I voted for Rocky Anderson and the Justice Party, because they were much, much, much closer to my actual views, and there were no socialist candidates on the ballot in Idaho. So I didn't want to vote for Obama again. And given a choice in 2016, if I have a legitimate choice, which I hope that I do, I will not vote for Hillary Clinton. And if I will vote for a protest candidate because I think that's an important expression of our democratic duty. Our duty is to vote for our conscience, and she violates my conscience. Trump violates my conscience more. So if the polls look really, really close in Nevada, maybe I do have to just bite the bullet because we can't have Trump as our president, and we should try to help Hillary Clinton win Nevada.
Right point of view. I think that you have the right point of view in that if it's really close, then you kind of bite the bullet. But if it's not, then no, don't. Vote for who you actually believe in. And see, that's why a couple weeks ago I was terrified of Sanders and wanted him to stop. But now, as the media is finally saying, "Oh, now you should drop out," I'm like, "But he's not a threat now. Why would you tell him to shut up now? I mean, now all he's going to do is he's going to make Hillary more progressive, and that's a win for all of us."
Yeah, if it ends up helping some working families, or if it raises the taxes on some hedge fund managers, I guess he's accomplished some of his goals in this election. If the bar is set so low for Bernie to have success, which it was, by the way, nobody expected him to go this long. The bar was set so low that anything that is accomplished, anything progressive in the next 6 months because of him, is, I guess, a success of some kind. Long live capitalism, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you make these little changes on the edge that try to encourage people to think of each other more as human beings and as people instead of reinforcing these divisions of gender and race and class that the Republicans so often shove in our faces, then yeah, I think that's a success, and I think it's a move in the correct direction. Even if we have to support someone that's not perfect, like Hillary Clinton, to do that.
Well, I also think this is
pragmatic.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think it jives with the general trend of history. I think Democrats today are more liberal than Democrats were in the 1960s. And I think that as a party, it has moved very small increments to the left, like you said, and that more Democrats now favor a more open society today than the Democratic Party did 50 years ago. And you can see that from the protests that happened in Chicago in 1968. So as a general rule, this fits with the historical trajectory of the party. And I think probably good, I guess.
You guess.
I'm really struggling with this because I think the last 8 years, when I've been an eligible voter, has put me in a lot of really bad positions holding the political views that I do. So it's been very difficult for me being an American socialist.
You can kind of make those kind of incremental changes. Incremental changes just never feel good.
Because they don't speak to our actual demands. It feels like we had to give something up. It makes us feel a little dirty inside. It's like, we let the Republicans win, and it feels bad. Feels bad in the heart, man. But like I said in my article where I endorsed Sanders, I said Sanders' policies are just buying away the best for the working class people. Those are my people. Therefore, Sanders is the closest to me in this election. I have to look at him at least as a legitimate expression of some part of my political views. So I was willing to compromise only because Sanders was so close to the working class. I don't know if I can do that in the future with Hillary Clinton. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I mean, I think she'll be at least somewhat good for the working class.
Better than Trump, I guess.
Yeah. Way better than Cruz. I mean, for me, it's a question of, am I going to be campaigning for Hillary Clinton or am I going to be voting for her? Because if the candidate is Cruz, then I'm going to be on the ground over the summer in Idaho, begging people, please God, I know you hate Hillary Clinton, but make the right choice for the first time in your life. Please. If it's Trump, I mean, it depends on how hard he pivots, but it would be pretty hard to ignore some of the stuff he's said. But then if it's someone like Mitt Romney, I'm going to be like, oh, well, it's basically the same candidate twice. It's exactly like 2012 all over again, where I've got two versions of the same person.
Right.
I guess I'll vote for Clinton, but I'm not going to like go out and sweat and bleed for her.
Not gonna like it.
Yeah. I mean, there's some more important stuff to do. Like in our hometown,
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, there are big problems that I think socialism would help, specifically not in terms of like owning the city, because I feel like our like who cares about the mayor in our city?
I don't even know who the mayor is. I don't think I voted for a mayor ever.
Yeah. Labor organization though is horrific there.
Absolutely.
Like every single place I worked except for Safeway.
Yeah, I worked at Safeway. I didn't know you worked at Safeway.
Yeah, we worked at Safeway and it had a union and that was awesome.
Yep.
And then every other place I've worked. So there was Center Partners or whatever it's called now. It's something else, but there's the telecommunication thing, and it treats its employees like utter trash and burns through them and makes their lives awful.
Right.
There's nothing to defend those people because there is no union. There are also factories in Coeur d'Alene where the people are treated awfully, no union. And everybody in the town knows that Hagedon and the main resort, like the main resort in the town, treats its employees like utter trash. No union. Nothing to defend any of those people because we're a right to work state.
Yeah.
That is where I most want to see like socialists come in and do some good, even if they have to call themselves something if different, like we're the Labor Party. I don't know. There's got to be another name.
I've been arguing about the same thing that you have, is that socialists, as the United States electoral laws are currently constructed, socialists stand no chance of ever winning many elections. Even somebody like Kshama Sawant, who won in Seattle, she won by like 0.5 percentage point. She was almost defeated in the liberal bastion of Seattle. That's how close it was to get a socialist into public office. But you are correct that labor organization is going to be the key to the ideological revolution that leads us forward into socialism, is to organize working people for their own interests and for the interests of the class of working people as a whole. It's going to start small. It has to start small. We can't win major electoral victories. We don't have any electoral allies. We don't have a base of voting support. But what we do have is a natural class of people who are exploited on a daily basis. And I think that labor organization in a place like Idaho is the most important, because I think those people are the most alienated from the means of production. And that's because they, exactly like you said, they have no labor organization. They have no union to protect them. They live in a right-to-work state, which, I mean, what an ironic twist of phrase right to work is, but the idea being that they can't protect themselves, and you're right. That's why the minimum wage in Idaho is still $7.25. It's the federal minimum.
Yeah, it's awful.
And it's because they have nobody to fight for them.
They love it. They love it.
God.
Yeah, I mean, even working at Silverwood, like an over the summer thing, like, you can tell that these businesses don't, like, there is, like, Republicans have this myth of, like, the caring business owner that, like, loves their employees and gives to charity. Maybe if you're, like, a billionaire, maybe, like, optimistically, but for the managers in Idaho, no. Everything I've seen says that that's not true in reality. That's not how people actually work. Or they tell themselves that they're really nice. Like, I'm sure, like, the head of Silverwood thinks, oh, I'm bringing happiness to so many people.
Yeah, look at all these high school kids who have income because of me. Oh,
exactly.
So
they will say that, and then they'll say that, oh, it would undermine their income if we, like, raise the minimum wage. I'm like, no, what you're doing is you're profiting off them.
Yeah.
You're profiting off the labor of other people and treating them like trash and then pretending that everything is okay.
And this is why Sanders' campaign has been so important. If you read the Jacobin magazine, they've been making this argument pretty consistently, is that this presents the working class movement in the United States with a new opportunity, because Sanders has spoken deeply to the working class in some way about income inequality and about the terrors of capitalism. He has brought to them some semblance of consciousness during this election cycle, and that should be harnessed into a working person's movement. I wanted to start a political party, and I'd call it like the Workers' Party or something like that. Because you're right, we can't call ourselves socialists yet. That's just too risky, I guess.
I am a little less optimistic than Jacobin Magazine because it seems like the poor working class has unfortunately gotten an alternative voice that they think speaks to them, and his name is Donald Trump.
Well, I have unfortunately
really
heard
unfortunate.
Trump thinks he can win Sanders supporters. And I think, oh God, I mean, sure, he's going to get a couple anti-establishment people. He's going to get a couple people who go, fuck it, vote for Trump, burn it to the ground. He's going to get a couple of those type people. And I saw one person, I'm on Reddit all the time. I saw one person comment that they were a Sanders supporter and now they're a Trump supporter. And I was like, who are you? And when do I get to kill you? Like, when can the revolution start so I can line people like you up against the wall? By the way, this is all a joke. I want my entire audience to know that I am completely joking. I do not want this to be misunderstood.
The wall is an analogy for Wall Street, and lining up is an analogy for food stamps or something. I don't know.
There you go. Okay, that's fine.
Perfect. Awesome.
I think that's an excellent place to end the conversation. The way that we end the show is that we like to give recommendations. Something that you heard or read this week that you think you want other people to read or think about. I have mine written down already, and I forgot to warn you at the beginning of the show.
That's fine. I actually listened to other episodes.
Oh, good. Okay, so you're familiar.
And I made sure to have a couple things, although maybe not from this week, but I have a few things
That's
that
fine.
I recommend. So do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead and go first, and then I'll close the show.
All right, so I have two things, actually, that I want to recommend. One is a book I've been reading, and I've been pretty entranced with it for a while. It's called Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And not only is it a great book about labor organization, but it also speaks a lot to the campaign and kind of watching how people attack each other, because he presents it as his rules can only be used by like the poor and the underprivileged. But if you look at the campaign, a lot of the strategies they use to attack each other and undermine each other come like the rules still apply. Like you can, so it's kind of like a political guidebook, which I think is really awesome. It probably comes from the fact that he was so politically active in the 1960s, and things haven't changed that much. The other thing I would recommend is 538's election podcast. If you're wondering about where the delegate numbers are and how close anybody is to winning, and also as the Veep stakes start coming up and some more nitty-gritty of the campaign, that's going to be the best source for your news, and so I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. 538 I endorse wholeheartedly. I think they're doing fantastic work. What they do with statistics and demographic models and all of this is so absolutely fascinating to me, because I'm not really a math-based person, but they explain to you the math behind the polls and the models that they use so well, and that even if you don't like statistics or if you're even bored with the election, this is a podcast that's going to give you a different kind of perspective on the whole thing, and it's really interesting. So I completely agree with that recommendation. My recommendation is a little less serious. It's a song called They Love Me, which is a music video starring Roy Wood Jr. and Jordan Klepper from The Daily Show. And it's a really catchy rap song they wrote using only Donald Trump quotes. And it is so funny and so good. I'll play a little clip of it here at the end of the episode. But you should go look it up. It's called They Love Me, and it's by Black Donald Trump. And it is so funny, and you must look it up.
Oh man, I'm gonna listen to that as soon as this show is over.
Oh, you should.
That sounds fantastic.
It's really funny, and it was made on TV, so it's not like really dirty or gross or anything. So it's really funny. Hey, thank you so much for being the inaugural Skype interview Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast guest.
Oh yeah, no, it was great. Thank you. Hopefully,
we might. I mean, do you want to make this like a regular thing? Like maybe we check in once a month or something.
Sure, we could do that.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Handsy Comprehensive Exam podcast. Be sure to follow the blog at handsykcomprehensiveexam.com.
You believe Ted Cruz, you've been killing our country. Lying Ted Cruz, use a picture of Melania. Careful lying Ted, I'll spit the beans on your woman. I be watching Modern Family, written by Mo. I never liked Bette Midler's persona.
Told you.
I have black guys counting my money. The one who could beat Hillary. I'm not a Mitt Romney. Remember, I'm the only candidate who self-funded.
Told you.
Make America great again. Fingers on young and beautiful. Look at these hands. I win, I always win. Some people say I'm very, very, very intelligent. Mexico is not a friend. Build the wall. I love the Mexicans. Nobody has more respect for women. Heidi Klum, sadly, no longer attend. True. Check me out, Democrats, they love me. Woo! Check me out, these Muslims love me. Stop hating, these women love me. These gays love me. Everybody love me.
Told you.
Check me out, Megan Kelly, she love me.
Yeah.
Check me out, illegals, they love me. What it do, these veterans love me. Protest